Our next session is Sense, Smell, Touch, collaborating in theatre making. You see, no matter if it's a web series on 4K resolution or a film on an IMAX screen, nothing ever matches up to the romance and the physicality of theatre. From the playwright to the director to the actors and finally to the spectators, not to forget the numerous other contributors like the set designers, costume creators. Theatre is truly a beautiful representation of how really different creative minds come together with a singular thought to create an unforgettable sensorial experience. We're really looking forward to this discussion between Anuradha Kapur and Deepan Sivaram on how creation is as much a collaborative process as it is about an individual piece of creation. Let me take a moment to introduce the speakers. Anuradha Kapur is a theatre maker and an academic. Her theatre work has travelled nationally and internationally, and she has taught in universities in India and abroad. She is the founder member of Vivadi, a working group of theatre makers, visual artists, filmmakers, musicians and writers. She was awarded the Sangeet Natak Akademi Award for Direction in 2004. Anuradha Kapur completed her term as Director National School of Drama, New Delhi in 2013, where she was also the Professor of Acting and Direction. She is presently visiting professor at the Ambedkar University, Delhi. Welcome, Anuradha Kapur. Deepan Sivaram is a renowned theatre director and scenographer based in Delhi. He is the founding artistic director of Oxygen Theatre Company in Kerala and Performance Studies Collective based in Delhi. He was the artistic director of the International Theatre Festival of Kerala for the 2014 edition, which had the curatorial focus on transition, spectatorship and gender. Presently, he is the Dean of the School of Culture and Creative Expressions at the Ambedkar University, Delhi. Ms. Kapur and Ms. Sivaram, over to you.
So thank you very much to the Hindu Lit Fest for inviting Deepan Sivaram and myself on a conversation about work and practice and collaboration in the theatre. Deepan and I have been working together almost for a decade now, and we are part of a kind of work process which has, I think, gained a fair amount of urgency and traction in the last some years in India, and its collaboration. And it is something that I think has been of interest to many theatre practitioners because they're interested in finding ways of changing form, of finding new vocabularies, of finding the meaning of collaboration. And I start by saying that collaboration is both method and practice. It is something that is to do with the fact that it is finding multi-authorship, but on the other hand, it's also finding a form to integrate or to put together or to assemble multi-authorship. But let me go to the title of the talk, which talks of sense of smell and touch, something that we are not usually expected to experience in the theatre. So Deepan and I have been interested in something or some kind of practice that brings in more of the sensorium into our work. So it's not just the normal listening and seeing that is part of theatre, but of the spectator and the actor experiencing a larger, richer, multi-sensorious experience. So the sense of smell, the sense of touch, the sense of taste is also part of the practice of making theatre. It may not be that all these senses come into one performance, but it may be that we at least attempt to awaken the sensorium by different sorts of ways. So the sense of smell and the sense of touch has been part of many of the projects that Deepan has made, and then together Deepan and I have made. For the actor, different kinds of sensorial experiences mean, for instance, lifting a heavy object lying in a tray of oil, smelling the bottom of a barrel, experiencing labor or task on the stage. All these awaken a certain kind of being on stage, but it also, and both Deepan and I will come to it through our talk. It also challenges certain norms that we have come to see as part of theatre. That in the theatre, the teapot doesn't have tea, but you must mime the tea and you must mime the drinking. The answer why you must do it, there is none. It's just convention. So there are many ways of looking at this title. When you look at lifting a barrel, pushing a car, driving and adjusting a crane, in many of our works, that's what makes character, not the psychological characterization as we've come to understand it. But if we think about it, in acting too, in the most classical 19th century acting manuals, Stanislavski, for instance, he will always say the action makes the character. Because you cannot show thinking on stage by sitting and thinking. You have to show thinking by what is happening to your inside, by the kind of action that you choose to do. So awakening a sensorium has been part of early 20th century interest. Artaud, for example, has looked at that, but I'll come to Artaud in a minute. Just to say that before we come to Artaud, I want to stress the point that traditional performances in India have always worked with the sensorium. They have worked with earth, water, mud, smell, the smell of incense, the smell of vegetation, the smell of cut agricultural field. In the Ramlila of Ramnagar, the whole walking experience is the experience of the text. In Tayyam, the whole action or the field, the land is the experience. So traditionally, we have all the senses working in the theatre. In the early 20th century, Artaud pushes for this idea that the theatre must awaken all the senses, that it mustn't have the illusion of awakening, but actually awakening the senses. And so we pay attention to the fact that this kind of interest has had a long history, but it's also had an equally long history where the senses have actually become primarily connected to seeing and hearing. And that's part of a modernist legacy. And I hand over to Deepan over here to talk about this legacy, which is very much a part of his practice in how to challenge, work through, understand, and then we come to various other parts of it. So, Deepan.
Thank you, Anuradha. And thank you, Hindu Festival, for having me in this session. So, modernity theatre does not have a long history that maybe European theatre can claim. And as we know that the modernity in art and many other areas of cultural intervention has began as part of the Nehruvian project. And one name in theatre that we have to mention here is Ibrahim Al-Qasi. So emergence of Ibrahim Al-Qasi as one of the prime, I would call as a leader of this modernist theatre movement in this country after returning from London, where he was studying at Royal College of Art, Royal College of Dramatic Art, and he took over the leadership of National School of Drama, where he introduced the modernist methodologies of theatre making, bringing an etiquette and a culture of theatre making that has a long legacy till now. If you look at the theatre making, acting, design, across the areas of components of theatre making, Al-Qasi's legacy can be quite visible. However, one thing what Al-Kasi was very much keen on practicing in his production was his vision for a language of theatre that very much in line with the kind of theatre that was practiced at that point of time internationally, especially in Europe. And the actors who worked along with Al-Kasi and also actors who graduated from the theatre school where Al-Kasi was in the leadership, they had this legacy to take, they really took off that legacy because there was a methodology to lean on. And that methodology of acting, as Stanislavski today, methodology, acting was something that they had to step on. But I'm not sure whether that Al-Kasi legacy, whether that actually managed to kind of move on in the terms of directors and designers in intervention in theatre. This is interesting because Al-Kasi was very keen on the material presence of the theatre, the physical presence of the theatre. He was one of those directors who actually come up with this idea of directors' theatre. There was a time of writers' theatre. The writers were, if you look at the pyramid of the hierarchy of theatre making, the top brick was the writer, the playwright. So Al-Kasi's intervention was, Al-Kasi brought up with this idea that theatre is not literature, but it's a physical presence that takes place in time and space. And he was very much interested in not just in the working with the actors, but also the design, the scenographic aspect of it, the scale of the production, the materiality of each and everything what he used, object or costume, scenic of site, space, everything he was very much keen on, look very detailed way. And that is very modernist thing because, it also offers a single perspective viewing. And his practices mostly happen on proscenium theatre and also some of the site like Pirashkotla and some of those kind of monumental architectural site, he used it. But however, audience or the spectators were placed at opposite of the performance side, which means that you sit on one side and you see the performance on the other side, which we call the single perspective viewing. And single perspective viewing is very much of a modernist proposition. And here is where the kind of theatre, what we are discussing now, the sensorial theatre. A sensorial theatre needs a different kind of a spectatorial intervention or spectatorial positioning. You cannot have the complete sensorial experience of viewing if you sit only one place and watch the performance throughout, right? So here we have these questions, the very fundamental question we often ask. Why is a spectator coming into theatre? What are they expecting to get from there? Are they coming there to get entertained? Or are they there to get enlightened? Are they there to peep? A private show that has been offered, the way we understand a proscenium arch is a box where you take off one wall and you can look through a private life being enacted. Or are they there to participate? Or are they there to observe? Or are they there as neighbors? So these are the very important questions. The moment we try to answer this question, we will get a very important terminology that's called scenography. And this answering this very question, why is spectator there and how are we going to engage with them? How the language of the theatre will come to them and take them part of this entire live experience of a given point of time. And that will give you some answers to the philosophy of scenography. I would like to show some works, some slides while I talk. And let me share my screen to show some work, including one of the important work of Al-Kasi. Yeah. So here is one production I was mentioning about Al-Kasi. It's a site-specific work of an early work.
Andayut.
Andayut. And here we could see the site the materiality, the details that went on to make conceptualizing a work life. The costume, the stall, the staircase, all of it had such a details of modernist vision. But the audience were seated on the opposite and they were seeing the production on the other side. And here we were talking about the spectatorship, and I was asking certain questions why a spectator entering into a theatrical space. This is a production which I have directed with the National Institute of Students in 2012. This is a production called Oberoi, which is an adaptation of Alfred Jarry's French writing, Oberoi. And in here, as you could see that this is a performance site. And this space been conceptualized as a jail or a concentration camp. And why is a concentration camp? Because Ubu is a fascist who took over the country, and he bring his system of functioning, and the audience are forced to go inside, and whether they like it or not, then you have to sit and see it. So the conceptualizing the site, as you could see, it was coming from the very question why the spectators are there. They're there to witness the mad regime of Ubu, but they have no choice to go out. Whether they like it or not, they have to be seen. It's almost like a forced kind of entertainment. Let me also look at another work. This is a production of the same production image of Oberoi, or this particular work. This production is called Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, with Anuradha Kapur and I collaborated. Anuradha Kapur, you would like to say something about this particular work, especially this particular image?
Yes. This image is of a truck that when lit up from inside, the truck appears with a box. But when you light it up from inside, you see people in there. Now, here the question is, you're standing and a truck appears and parks in front of you, and you have no idea what you're waiting for. So are you at a roadside? Are you waiting to board a truck? Are you bus passengers? Who are you? And when the truck parks and lights up and there are characters telling the story of Dr. Jekyll and Hyde in it, you have the scenography, the decision, the conceptualization is that the image comes to you. But when you sit in a conventional theater, the image plays out in front of you. Here it comes to you. It can be, you can have it on wheels. You can go to an image can come to you on a theater in a one end stage, or the image can come in on a truck and park. Each of the experiences are different. In Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, we had 3 or 4 kinds of images. One, like on this truck, came to you. One that was in a locked room, you had to break a lock and go in. One that was in a small dark room. One was in a garden. Each experience then was different. One was actually over 4 windows, like the window display in a shop. Each experience is pointing to you as spectator being central to the image. How do you see it? Who you are? Where are you? And why are you there? The questions that everybody asks in theater. So that is the kind of collaboration that Deepan and I did for Dr. Jekyll. Deepan, you have other images?
Sure. This is another image of Dr. Jekyll and Hyde. Yeah. You want to continue that?
This is a projection of Hyde on the scale of the building of the National School of Drama. The projection comes onto the building, and you then wonder whether you're actually seeing a nightmare, or has the man taken over the building, or what is the crane doing in front of you? All these questions you're asking because the site is making you ask them. The site is in front of you, and it's actually telling you to question who you are, why are you there? And this is a full-size 2-story building, a projection on that. Yes, Deepan, if you have.
This is a production called The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which I have directed with a group of students and later with the Performance Studies Collective group from Delhi. And this particular work was conceptualized and conceived from a warehouse space in North Delhi, where Ambedkar University is located. And the way that we began this project was responding to this warehouse space. What all been offered in this space, or what all kind of site been, what all kind of details of, objects and various materials already lying down there. And this was the starting point. I mean, of course, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is a very well-known silent cinema of expressionist time. But when we were looking at this work in a contemporary time, again, this is a story is about a Caligari, and it has been studied as the Caligari to Hitler. In a way that it predicted, Hitler's and Nazi raising in Germany. So this production was done in 2016, where the audience are coming here to witness again this magic world of Caligari, where he kept a somnambulist Cesare, which is in a way an allegory of this fascist idea that open up and it come out and it can terrorize people. This is another image, and especially I was talking about the opening up of the image of the box, where this Cesare is coming out and ready to take the questions of the spectator. So there is a dialogue begin from the very, very beginning of the play, where spectator can ask that you can ask any question, and the Cesare answers, and that is the trigger where the dramaturgy further develops. This is a production of Virasat. It's a very well-known dramatic text written by Mahesh Kunjwar, and Anuradha Kapur directed this work in 2013 for a National School of Dramatic Company, which I have collaborated with the scenographer. Would you like to say a few things about this production as well?
Yes. And here, I think, is central to what Deepan and I have been saying is point of view. And that from which point of view do you actually see the play? As you can see, the actual design has the audience all around. And Deepan was concerned that at no place should the audience be more than the first row, 2 feet or 2.5 feet away from the playing area. So now you see the audience tiered up, and you see women in front cooking. The other grammar of this play was that nothing was done as fake, as it's called, pretend in the theater. It was all done really. So if there's cooking, they're actually cooking. So they're making parathis, they're making whatever the local food, they're actually cooking. There is a water body in the center, as there is in traditional houses, which had actual water. So they actually bathed, actually washed the clothes, actually cooked. And depending on where you sat, you had the story. So you could be sitting near the bedroom, and the story would have been told for you, your experience, as if via a bedroom. I want to add a small detail here. Deepan came to this conceptualization from an improvisation that the actors did. And let me share that improvisation. I had said to the actors, you must tell the story in 10 minutes, the whole story. The plays, 3 plays, so it's about 4 hours of storytelling, in 10 minutes, but from the perspective of a room. So there was the story as it was told via a kitchen, via a bedroom. Some women told it via the temple. One woman told it via the go-down. So the story itself changed from where you looked at it. And that is how the point of view became the conceptual frame of Deepan deciding the set, which had a sleeping room, a room for a woman who had given up the house and was remaining in a kind of balcony setup, on a mezzanine by herself. There was a go-down, there was a temple, there was a swing, and centrally there was water. So the house, in fact, became a place where you had points of view. And let me then add, the audience, if you can see them around, had to ask themselves, am I part of the family? Am I a voyeur? Am I a neighbor? Am I a family member? Who am I? And in the interval of the play, we asked them to change their seat. So they could choose and go somewhere else and maybe then look into the story from another point of view. Yeah, Deepan? So you can see the water body in the center. You can see women sleeping. At some places, you needn't even see them. They were sleeping in corners that you couldn't see them. One of the things that we realized in Virasat when we did it in this set and where audience was always, the actors were present, had no exit, that the only time the women exited from the Vada, which means house, was when they were dead, because most of the time they were inside and working. And this understanding came to us when the Vada, the house, actually shaped the lives in very substantial ways, and we understood it via the set. Yeah, Deepa.
Right. So as a stenographer, just one thing I would like to add on this. The kind of initial conversation I and Anuradha Kapur had was, when we realized that moment of these actors were improvising that particular act of taking us through the house, and we were asked to sit in the kitchen, and we could see the live cooking of the woman. At the same time, we know that the play is also taking place in the other rooms as well, which we cannot see it, but we can hear that there are people inside.
Yes.
So this question, why this audience, why the spectators are there? Again, this question was asked, and they are there because they came to attend the funeral of the eldest man which is passed away. So when the audience are ended there, actors are asked them to go into different places. Some of them been asked to sit in the kitchen. Some of them been asked to sit in the veranda, or somebody will be sitting in the balcony. So this answering that very question, and we immediately gave them a role that you are either neighbors or the distant family members. So we have spoke about this work, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I have a few more images here to look through it, because Anuradha Kapur already said about this different kind of a location. And this was a promenade performance piece that you take a journey rather than sitting in one place. So you go along with the actors. So it was more of like a treasure hunt. It was more because the Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the material of that play is almost like a detective kind of story that you're kind of trying to find something, a mystery around Dr. Jekyll, and we eventually found it. And in that journey of finding it, the spatial configuration been planned between the performer and the spectator, and they have been take them through a different site, and 8 locations they have walked through, and one of those locations was the truck that coming to the audience instead of you are walking towards a performance site. So mostly you are walking towards a performance site, and in one occasion a performance come towards you. This is again some of the images, and the left hand top image is the inside image of the particular work.
Yes. And you can see the fact that they're very close to there is the audience walking on the building and experiencing the building as if they are following the clues of who is Dr. Jekyll and who is Hyde, and where are the clues hidden in the story they found while walking.
Would you like to also say a few things about this book?
Yes, this is one of the latest productions that Deepan and I have collaborated in. And this production, called Naale Wali Ladki, is about how to be heard in a society where you can't be heard. And here, again, following the clue, do you come to experience something in which way? Is something coming to you and it stops in front of you? Or do you see it from a distance, from afar? So this Naale Wali Ladki had big platforms on which a police station could move, a smaller platform in which a a small platform in which the story of the village could be told, and a platform that you see in front of you, which is full of black water. And who is in it? Under the platform is the Safai Karamchari who cleans the drains of a city. So a tray emerged and a person emerged under it. After he finished telling us the experience of cleaning the drains, he was pulled backwards and under the platform, as is the case with drains. Again, the primary aspect of watching this play was point of view. Where do you sit? When you sit at a particular level, you see him come right at you. If you sit sideways, you see him in profile. If you see you're sitting in a corner, you may only see his head. But that is how we live. We don't see everything from the position of God, that we can see everything that is in front of us. No, there are many things that we don't see. And one of the attempts, I think, in the collaboration between Deepan and myself has been to stress that every view is a distinct view. There is no standardized view of hearing or listening or seeing a narrative. Yeah.
Just one more thing I would like to add here is that we were talking about spectatorship, and when we speak about spectatorship, the concern here is the site, the space. And in this particular work, if you could see that image here, there is a small village. The village coming to the space on a tray, and so village coming on the tray is that this particular story is about a young baby girl was raped and her body was found in a nala, and it's a fight for justice by her mother, who is a daily wage labor, and two of her children, and none of the system want to listen to her, and she is fighting, and eventually she even sold her land to hire a printing machine to print out the material, to paste it across the township. And we were thinking how to bring the village to the space. And this village was brought in on this tray, like you could see here. And there is a reason why we decide to bring the village in this fashion. Would you like to come here and add a few things here?
Yeah. This exercise of bringing the village in has a little bit of a story, and let me tell you it in abbreviation. It was an exercise that I had proposed to the students. And I had said, if this kind of rape had taken place in your village, please tell me the story of that mapped on your village. But the village has to be miniature, and it can be in whatever material you like to make it. But the end of it has to be that the village is destroyed. So we got about 8 versions. And just quickly to tell you, one was made by straw. The other was made by paper. Another was made by blocks of wood. One was made by wax. And the student had put heaters under the metal plate. So while he was telling the story of the rape in this village, the houses all melted. So what is happening is that we found that the architecture, the detail of the village had great similarities. There was a thana, there was a school, there was a dispensary, there was a nala, full of chemicals and plastic. Each of the stories had that. And from there came the title Nale Wali Ladki, the girl in the drain. So the students made these trays. Deepan came and saw them. We discussed a lot with the student designers. How are we going to bring them? And in comes the idea of a tray, that the miniature comes out and the two people talk about the landscape in detail. Oh, here is the thana. Oh, here is the school. See, there goes the chowkidar. There goes the thanedar. All that detail, but in miniature. In some senses, telling a large story or telling a small story, depending on which way you want to look at this trait of the landscape. Yeah, Deepan.
Yes. So we are spending lot of time of speaking about the space and the ways of seeing,
yeah,
and the materials being used.
Yeah.
But there is something which we would like to add in here is the literature, where which literature always brought in, and how we use the literature is a very important question, because in there is a history in theater that's where we began. That's the playwright's theater, a theater in the pyramid of theater that the top brick was playwright or the text, and text has given that much of importance. And we began by discussing what modernist theater was about: dramatic theater, the dramatic writing. When we talk about Shakespeare or Ibsen or any of these major canonical figures, were in fact stood there as the top end of the pyramid. I will go into the text part in a minute. The way we kind of explore text in a different way. But before that, this text is in always there as a starting point. But we always ask this question: whether text is a raw material, or this text is a guidelines for the performance action, or the text is a Bible that you cannot change it. It has to remain where it has been written. But what we always found is that text be a component of the total dramatical making. The text itself is not the primary thing for the communication of the experience. And this comes a very important question we often ask: what is the content of your play? And what is the content of your play? And that question being asked: what is the text? What is the writing part of it? So we desire to spend this much of time to speak about other elements of the theater, not just the text, because we want to make a point. The kind of theater that we're discussing here is a sensorial theater. Sense, smell, and touch, and the ways of seeing is very important for the viewing experience, or the experience of the kind of total world we talk about theatrical language. And for that, it's important to have these various components come together to make a meaning making. But the text come as part of the one component. Now, what else can be done with the text? I mean, traditionally or conventionally, we hear the text. We hear to the text, and also we can read the text. This is the way we do things. We do. The moment word comes into your hand, you can read it, or you can listen to it. But can you do more than with that? You can do more than with that in theater. That's something which we would like to talk here. For example, this particular slide is Civil Naframani was used towards the end of this particular work called Nale Wal Ledki. And once this audience sat through this entire performance, and where this sort of this protest gesture of this woman desperately want to make a point, what happened to her young girl, and eventually she was forced to be silent by the system and police. And towards the end of the work, in fact, there was a water cannon was brought in, and she was stood in the front of that. Would you like to add here, Anuradha, especially with this word called Jawab?
So there are two things that I'd like to add here, and that is that the text as read is one thing, but when the text is written separately on various things, when we read a text on a wall, it's different. When we read a text on paper, it's different. And one of the exercises in this play was to find a way of writing a text while doing work. So the woman in this play is wanting everybody to give an answer to what has happened to her child. So she washes clothes and she writes on the sari, the image prior to this, Deepan, with Jawab Do. So she writes on the sari she has washed with surf, Jawab Do, give me an answer. But when we read it on a sari written in front of you, the Jawab Do is different from if it were written on the billboard that we see on the big screen, this one. So the play is about various ways of looking at text and literature. So it's important that literature is not, as is being said by a wonderful writer on the theatre, William Worthen, he says the theatre is not a printing press. It doesn't only come out on the paper, it comes out on the body, it comes out on various scales. And so the text has a different experience if it is read in this big scale, civil nafarmani, or on a small scale which says jawab do, or even smaller scale of fly posting. Each one has a different material meaning. And I think that becomes extremely important. And I just want to, so here the jawab do, but I want to just remind ourselves, we tend to forget. And we say that the Greek theatre is written by Sophocles. Of course it is. But it is also written by the hillside into which the Greek theatre is positioned. Deepan, can we see that slide of the Greeks, if we can?
I'm just bringing it.
Yeah. So the Greek theatre, huge scale. Yeah, huge scale. 25,000 spectators. There is on the text of the Greek theatre, when we read it today, many repetitions. Here comes Tiresias, here comes Tiresias, here comes Tiresias, 4 times. Why 4 times? Because the man has to walk 70 to 80 feet for visibility. So if I were to be provocative and offer you an idea that it's the hillside that has written Antigone, as much as the playwright who puts down the word. So where literature is performed, changes literature. Just as we can understand that Pinter's The Room cannot be performed here. It can be only performed in a room, like an auditorium or a black box. So here we are actually saying that the space comes in exactly parallel to the meaning and changes meaning. Yeah, Deepan? I think something here about the way you have worked with text, not as just read, not as just on paper, on whatever, but sometimes burnt, sometimes constructed. And that's been part of your practice.
Right.
So text as raw material in a way which makes it a construction. So if you might want to gloss that, Deepan.
Yes. So we were talking about the text, and we'll be bringing some of the other major works we have done in terms of. We just spoke about Virasat, and also I'll be speaking about Kasakindi Dihasam, which I have directed some time back. But before that, we were speaking about what all can be done with the text and how text can be presented or represented here. For example, this particular project, which I have worked with, again, Performance Studies Collective students and the team, here we worked on the Constitution of India. And what happened to that performance space is that it's, in fact, a group of construction workers building a word called nationalism. And this lasts about 2 hours of construction. They keep making the construction of this word in a warehouse space where a group of band players trying to tune and practice national anthem. They don't sing, they don't play national anthem, they only practice bits and pieces. So throughout the performance, of course, there are various actions take place in the act. For example, an image of Gandhi's image has been taken out of this space, or something else is brought in that space, and they're all happening. But the main action in this work is that construction of this word called nationalism. So seeing of a construction of that word was very important, important action. So there was another production I worked earlier. We were talking about Uberoi, and in this particular production, there is a sequence towards the end. The war, when war started to begin, and a text called war get burned. And you can see the W on the right side. The either side of the performance space, the large text called war get burned. And the real heat of the word war, you can feel it. You can feel and you can see the smoke of the war. It gives you a feel of the war. It's also in a way is a burning of the idea of the dramatic. Because dramatic theater is lost in the dramatic text. This is another image of that production. And I'm coming here. This is an image of Kazakh Itihasam, which I was mentioning, Legends of Kazakh. The reason why I brought in here, because Legends of Kazakh is a very important piece of writing in the history of Indian literature. So O.V. Vijayan's this work, when I adapted for stage in about 5 years ago with a group of village actors from Trikiripu in North Malabar, Kasaragod district. At the beginning of this work, we went to see the real village of Tasrak in Palakkad, where Vijayan, in fact, lived for a short period of time. And we all know in the history that Vijayan actually observed the people and the life of the people in Tasrak, and that eventually was the starting point for writing Kazakh Itihasam. So when we went there, after many years later, almost 50 years later of writing this novel, we felt the culture, the life Vijayan, narrated in his novel doesn't exist that anymore. It has become a forgotten history. Its novel has become a story of a bygone time. So the culture been buried here. So the buried culture, how are you going to represent buried culture? Or how are you going to present buried culture? Then we came up with this proposition that who are this audience? Why are they there again? They are there to hear the stories of the Kazakhians. So the space almost become a excavation ground where you can excavate the culture, the life of the people, and you start to unearth from the soil the life of the people, the object, the tailoring machine, the tea shop equipments, everything been buried in the soil, and the slowly been unearthed and been part of the performance. So by doing that, the space transformed to become a metaphor rather than only a site for the performance. Had an image of a drawing of a mosque on the floor with the rice flour done by the Muslim priest. It's almost like an etching of the history of the soil, and which the same etching of that history or the drawing of the mosque been erased by the Sivaram Nair the moment he enters and saying the history has nothing to do with the Islam tradition. And this fight, this Cold War between this Moilia, the Mullah, and Sivaram Nair is the central concern of the novel. Of course, there are various things happen. The main thread of the novel not necessarily deal with the fight between this elderly man, but this is the culture, the premise of the novel is situated rightly there. Because the novel begins from the Palakkad, has a history of the invasion of Tipu Sultan. And that history has so much to do with the people in Tasrak. This is the image of that, I'm sorry, I'm just crossing over here, the image of the Nalewala Lediki village, coming in more detailed image. Let me just stop sharing the images here, and let's talk about form of theatre, which is important because these all various components we discussed here, the terms of objects and the text, and also the spectatorial positioning and the ways of seeing, this all together what we call the form. So Anuradha Kapur, would you like to take it over from here and just come up with this? We always hear this very much, the one problem we always say, the form versus content. The form took over the content. What is the content of your performance? It's submerged in the form. So you may come here and take it from here.
It's a very, very long debate, and it has many ramifications, and it appears again and again, form and content. And some of the work that I think Deepan has shown now, and a lot of the work that I think we are both interested in, and many of my generation, and certainly many of Deepan's generation, is interested in the fact that form is content and content is form, both are together. That's why I meant to say, when I said it about the Greek theatre, is the theatre the form or the word the form? The word is formed for the theatre, and that's the form. So in some senses, This is an artificial division. The content, when it comes to you in a particular way, is experienced because the form is that we have developed in a particular way. In Khasak, the story comes to you across 100-foot space, which sometimes is a village, sometimes is a burial ground, sometimes is a space of memory. But that is the form of the novel which Deepan has decided. Or, for instance, if I and Deepan have worked at a play and we decide that the form of the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is walking, then the content appears by walking. For us, and for many of us as this kind of practitioner, there is no difference. If a story is told to you by walking, your experience of the content will be that. I bring in Ramnagar Ramlila, you walk for 31 days. You walk sometimes all the evening from 4 to 8, and the scene that you see is 3 minutes. Now the question is, what is the form? Or what is the content? Is the content the Ramcharitmanas or is it walking? So this, I think, is a false division between form and content in the theatre. The form affects the content, shapes the content, and the content also shapes the form. They are like two things linked together. They are not separate containers, and they are not separate vessels. They are actually woven. And I'll come to an example of what I think they are in the way they're woven at the very last, the image of what is the interlink, but we'll talk about that. So I want us then to look at a play called Dark Things. It was called Dark Things because it was the underbelly of the Silk Route, a text that had been written by Ari Sitas in 2017 about the Silk Route, all the various labor practices that happen in the underbelly of the Silk Route. Economic migration, working in labor camps, building the iPhone, working, cleaning the scavenging, the drain systems. What are the hardest, most difficult aspects of labor that are built today into our lives in building infrastructure, cities, trade? That was the story of Dark Things. And in Dark Things, the form of this story was decided by looking at various laboring, whether it's driving a crane, whether it's working with an oil drum, whether it's building a little iPhone. It was all about laboring. And that was the very form. And perhaps, Deepan, we can look at some of the images to clarify this.
Yeah, just before when I show this image, you would like to add one thing here, because we're speaking about the form. We're speaking about many other components of theatre, something which we do not speak about the actor. A theatre, as you often hear, is an actor's medium. So, I think it's important that you also speak where the actor has been placed in this kind of theatre we'll be talking about. A theatre is an actor's medium, or a cinema is a director's medium. We often hear this kind of a categorization of these two. But of course, there is a kind of theatre where actors may do a major role, take a major position in the total dramatical construction. But the kind of theatre what we're talking about is theatre as a rather more of a hybrid form, whether it's not just an experience that you have by looking at the face of an actor, not necessarily the emotional engagement that you have with the performer on the stage, but also a printing machine, the way a printing machine functions, and also the way the soil being structured such a way, as I was talking about the Khasak, the soil and the excavation ground is very much important as part of the dramatical construction.
So, and I'll add over here, let us say, looking at the printing machine, the students have to actually work over several days to get a control on the printing machine. And when we show you the moving image, you'll see it required work. She had to work with the gear. She had to work with the wheel. Now, in that, who is telling me about the character? The machine is telling me about what the woman is doing. And by doing that, she's building her character. The task is building the character. This kind of dramaturgy is often called task-based dramaturgy, as opposed to what's happening inside her. What is happening inside her is also how she's handling a machine. When a crane driver brings in the crane, we are not talking about what is happening inside her or him, but we are seeing what is happening inside her or him by the labor he's putting in. So there is a discussion about where to place the actor. And I think there has been a long argument. Did the set eat up the actor? Did we say the face of the actor? All these things also amount to a certain understanding of your rights as a spectator. I'll just bring in two small details. When the biggest stars of Indian theatre in India, in the north, in Gujarat and Maharashtra, the female impersonators were the biggest stars. And so big were the stars that the women wore the words of that star, Jai Shankar Sundari, woven, embroidered on her sari. So what were we seeing? We were seeing the actor as star. But the actor as star in a situation in Dark Things is a star along with the crane he drives or she drives. And there's a difference. And the second example that I want to give is a very famous example. Everybody knows about it. That Stanislavski rebelled against the grammar of the stage that he came to, that no actor could show their back on the stage. Why? Because the face was consumed. The face was consumed, and if you showed the back, you were breaking a rule. He said, no, you show a back if you're exiting. Otherwise, you have to exit sideways like this. What a joke. What happens to the story? So he said, you play the story. If you have to exit at the door that you see at the back of my room, go to the door as you would normally go. So where is that relationship? Is the door the hero or the actor the hero? The action is the hero. And I think that's where we come to this play that Deepan and I really enjoyed doing, because it put us into a situation of asking questions about acting, asking questions about hierarchy in the theatre. What is the hierarchy? Playwright, text, actor, and then all the rest, subalterns? Or is it a different kind of mixing? And here I come to what I was saying. I think Deepan and I, in our practice, want to see theatre as not as a pyramid, but as grass, all linked like this horizontally, each of it, so that it is multi-authored, not something at the top and something at the bottom. Yeah, Deepan?
Yeah, that's a very nice way of almost concluding the conversation. We are almost kind of reaching towards the end of it. But we would like to show some of our work, so moving images, not too long, to get some sense of what we were saying. Because many times when you look at an image, you might not get a complete sense of, of course, you won't get the complete sense of it by looking at the video either. But still, you will get a sense of the scale and the size and how performative bodies been choreographed, and their relationship with the object and their relationship with the spectator space as well.
And so sight. And sight, so important.
And sight. So we begin with a work. We spoke about quite a bit about Ladiki. I think I should also begin to show that particular work. It's a 2 minutes of video. It's a trailer video. So it's a edited version that I just want to share with them.
Southern trees bear strange Blood on the leaves and blood at the road. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze. From the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scent of magnolia, sweet and fresh.
आने वाली लड़की बिल्ली की लाश.
Then the sudden smell of burning flesh.
I will also show a work of the cabinet of Dr. Caligari. I will show you snippets because the work was developed from a warehouse, and we were talking about sight, how sight trigger the dramaturgical imagination. And this work is a very good example of that particular work, particular process of making work.
Yeah, the sight as dictating the form and the content. Yeah.
Shall I also show a work of Dark Things?
Yes, I think so. I think
Yeah,
that
you can say a few things about dark things, the site, especially the site in university where we initially performed, and I will be sharing it now.
so. The site was a corner of a university AUD. It had about a 60-foot playing area with 110 feet across the buildings. There were three kinds of buildings: a concrete block and a building with a tin roof. And it was played on disused tennis courts, which are now used as parking lots at Ambedkar University, Delhi. Yes.
Capitalism's tonic, the new Viagra. I curse you.
A dash on a page and then I drop down. I drop down. I drop down like. A dash on a page and then I drop down.
We know what a skeleton looks like. The point is to reconstruct them properly. Right bone for the right story.
I drop, what a drop, I drop like a screw. I drop unnoticed.
Just also like to show the works we were just speaking about, the Gins of Kazakh, because it's also an important work, especially also because of the literary quality of that work. I would like to also show you a small snippet of that as well.
ായ തമ്പുരാന്റെയും നബിയുടെയും പദരീങ്ങളുടെയും ദേവനായ സയ്യിദ്മിയാൻ ഷേഖും തങ്ങന്മാരുമായിരുന്നു. 1000 കുതിരകളും കേടറ്റ വെള്ള കുതിരകളായിരുന്നു. ഷേഖ് തങ്ങളാകട്ടെ ചടച്ച് കിഴവനായ ഒരു പാട്ടൻ കുതിര പുറത്താണ് സവാരി ചെയ്തത്. കുതിരയ്ക്ക് കാല് കഴച്ചപ്പോൾ നിൽക്കണമെന്ന് കൽപ്പിച്ചു. തങ്ങന്മാർ കുതിരകളെ കരിമ്പലകളിൽ തളച്ചിട്ടു. രാത്രിയുടെ അവസാന യാമത്തിൽ പാണ്ഡൻ കുതിര ചത്തു. കസാക്കിലെ പനങ്കാട്ടിലാണ് അവനെ കുത്തിവെച്ചത്. പാണ്ഡൻ കുതിരയുടെ പനങ്കാട്ടിൽ തങ്ങന്മാർ പാളയമടിച്ചു. ആ പാളയത്തിന്റെ സന്തതികളത്രേ കസാക്കുകാർ.
I think that's a fair amount of work to give you a sense of what we're speaking about. I just want to kind of add few lines to conclude it before I kind of hand over to Anuradha to have her concluding remarks. So we are speaking about a language of theatre that's not necessarily be called as a dramatic theatre, because the dramatic, where the text is taking very center stage, and also the conventional idea of the dramatic form, which we call the plot, development of the plot, the beginning, middle, climax, and catharsis. That structure is not necessarily be followed in here. So the jading of an audience is not necessarily be through that, the conventional idea of the how a narrative, developed through text and the conversation of the actors, but what all you see and experience in that space, the smell, touch, the food, what you eat, the heat and the rain, the feel of the soil on the floor, everything matters in that given point of 2 or 3 years of period of time. And that made possible because of this non-hierarchical ways of working, of collaborating with the various artistic mind, often from the very beginning, in the making of the piece to make a meaning of the particular performance that share with the spectator, and a spectator also never been treated as the god in here, but spectators are often treated as equals to the artist. If we are in the sun, you are also in the sun. If we are in the heat, you are also in the heat. If we are on the soil, you are also on the soil. And I would like to hand over this to Anuradha Kapur to have a concluding remark before we end it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just a few words for a remark, which would be that I think collaboration, as I said at the very beginning, is both form and method. Method, because if you start work together, if the music, the writing, the improvisation, the scenography, all starts together, we all develop a piece which has multi-authors. And collaboration as a form, theatre is all collaboration. Lights collaborate with the text, text collaborates with the space, space collaborates with costume. We only begin to think that it isn't collaboration. So theatre is a hybrid. It's multi-authored. And it has many internal collaborations. We take, for example, quite easily that 2 days of light rehearsals will be done. One rigging, one testing, one cues. Why are we waiting with the text? We are waiting because the light brings in meaning. In the process of making meaning, all these things in a certain kind of practice, or at least in a certain kind of passion for a certain kind of practice, which I think Deepan and I and many others have also tried to do, is that the text in collaboration is a multi-author. The scenography is as much an author as the text of the great text of Vijayan, the great text of Maheshal Kunchwar, as much an author as the actor is, as the costume is, as the water in a pond is. All of it creates meaning together. And I think that's where the title, if we return back to it, all our senses, all are collaborating in the meaning-making process. And I think that's what's so exciting about theatre, because theatre is certainly not a pure form. Theatre is a hybrid, always been, quite contaminated by other influences. And I hope it retains this energy to contaminate itself with many, many kinds of, in different horizontal relationships, no pyramids, no hierarchy. So that's what I'd like to say in our conversation. And it's Deepan and I, of course, had it's a privilege to have a decade-long conversation on art making, and I hope it's something that we can carry on. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this session on the magic of theatre and its unadulterated process. The use of the word spectators, and for the insights on how the spectators are as much involved in the process of the performance as the actors. Thank you.